Wonderful. Well, welcome everyone to another episode of Conversations in the Future of Work. I'm your host, Rachel Cossar, co-founder and CEO at Virtual Sapiens. And today is a very special day because we have the amazing coach AK on the show, and we'll be talking about the crossover between winning in sports, winning in sales execution, AI, communication, you name it. We're going to chat about it. So AK, I'm going to actually pass it over to you so you can share a little bit about your background, whatever you feel is most relevant to share with our audience.
I mean, sometimes that's the hardest question to ever ask is just tell me your story. Well, I grew up as a young lad, just joking. No, I grew up, I was actually, thank you, Rachel, just appreciate being on the show. And, about me is, I'm a triplet. So I have a twin brother, I have a twin sister, meaning that I have someone that looks exactly like me and someone that kind of looks like me, except with just longer hair. But the reason why I mention that is because oftentimes when we're, people ask like, who are we? I literally share my DNA with another person on this planet, but we still have different hobbies, different beliefs, still my best friend. But even when we're talking about this topic of winning in sales, winning in sports, living in this world in which we live in, there's so many things that I can say about myself that's going to fit under that one sentence byline. But we all have our own story. We have our own journey, right? Former professional athlete, speaker, I'm a coach at Google, have my own company, but overall, I'm a guy that, has two amazing little girls. I enjoy climbing and I enjoy just the ability to have these types of conversations with other humans.
Awesome. I had no idea that you were one of three humans sharing a room. That is incredible. So I love that we both share this professional athlete background. I think it's rare, but I think it's so relevant to the work that you do and the work that I do. So I would love to hear, like, on a day-to-day level, as you work with clients and do your work, like, how much are you calling upon that experience as an athlete? And just share more also about your sport and what you did.
Yeah. Well, I was lucky. I mean, I was not the best athlete starting out. I first played soccer, American soccer, and my dad let me know that I was not very good at it. He was my coach because he said that I always kept running past the ball. I was too fast. So what I ended up doing, I actually was lucky enough to run track and field at the University of Oregon, was blessed to be a 4-time All-American, ranked top 10 in the world, and then competed on an international scale. And then from my sporting world, I then went into more coaching about, instead of me being hopefully that superstar, helping other people become that superstar. So in terms of a lot of the stuff that I do with the leaders and the teams and that I work with, is one thing about athletes is the habits that they build. There's that skill set, right? Obviously, they have those abilities, right? And the higher up you go, you need to have more of those skill sets. And two is that mindset, right? We all know when you're that athlete or any type of performer, it's who are you on that day? How do you help control that anxiety, that nerves? How do you make sure that you show up the way that you need to, even in the midst of all this chaos? And then the last thing I usually talk about is that execution part. Is at the end of the day, as athletes, you can make the best plan, you can have the best mindset, but when that gun goes off, who are you going to be? So a lot of the work that I do with a lot of teams and leaders, and even my own sports background, is how do I focus on the who that I want to be? How do I take the actions that I need to take? And how do I create the habits to create that long-standing behavioral change?
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I think the behavioral change piece is huge in athletics, of course, but then also in any kind of profession, right? Because you think about being efficient with our time, and if we can build muscle memory that's really supporting us in effective ways, then we're kind of ahead of the curve there, right?
Yeah. But we all have muscle memory. We all have muscle memory, except some people's muscle memory is I hit snooze when I wake up in the morning.
Right. Well, exactly. It's like, how do you make that muscle memory align with your intention and your goals?
Exactly, 100%. And that's really what I think the biggest focus on is with a lot of the work that we want to do is how do we align the habits and the behaviors to the person that we want to be?
Right. Right. Beautiful. And so you've touched on this a little bit, even just in your previous answer, but when it comes to performing under pressure, right? Day comes, you got to walk out on that stage, you got to join that intense virtual meeting, like whatever the case may be, performing under pressure is a huge skill that you also have to develop. So what are some of your top strategies when working with clients on how they can actually show up day of and perform?
Well, a lot of people feel as though the only way to get ready to focus on your mindset is once the gun goes off. But I do a lot of somatic visualization with a lot of my clients. So I'll say, cool, let's bring you into that environment, right? Mentally, somatically. Like I want you to feel the floor. I want you to smell what's in this room. I want you to hear what you hear to really drop them into the place. And then I will throw different stimuli. So now I want you to imagine you're walking on that stage. I want you to imagine that you are meeting with this client. And then from there, I then put them into that place. And then I'm able to identify their emotional state. And I'll ask a simple question. You're about to get onto that stage. How do you feel? And they might say, ooh, I have anxiety. What most people don't realize is that anxiety and excitement are the exact same two similar emotions, except anxiety is an imagining negative outcomes, while excitement is imagining positive outcomes. So to switch that, I say, okay, before you even walk into that room, I want you to list 5 things that you are the most excited about or looking forward to as you're walking into this situation. Because at that moment, there's a negative loop happening in their mind. And by switching that within the somatic visualization, they're now learning tools and strategies on how to get into the right optimal state when that situation actually comes up. Now, the cool thing is with somatic visualization is you can literally do it right here. You can literally do it from anywhere. You can practice and get that repetition long before you actually get on to that starting line.
Right. I love that you bring that up. I used to do that. Actually, it's interesting. I still do that. Like as a dancer and a gymnast, I had this whole ritual the night before the competition or the performance, and I would go through my routine in my head. I would imagine from my perspective, like what the audience would look like, the lights, how it would feel. And I still do that to a certain extent before presentations and keynotes and such like. Do you also do you practice what you preach?
Oh, I practice what I preach, but I've done it so much now
Yeah.
that it becomes a habit. Like I know right now, what do I need to do?
Right. Right.
I just did a breathing pattern that dropped any type of anxiety that I may have had. And so what you're not seeing is the internal practicing of the repetition of now I know the mechanisms to put myself in to that optimal state that I'm trying to be in for any moment.
Right. Right. Which brings us back to what you said earlier about building those new habits and that muscle memory to support you so that you can do it right like that.
But that's interesting though that you say this, because a lot of people ask me, how do you build better habits?
Yeah.
Well, the problem isn't actually our habits, because the moment we've actually been able to get that habit, it's no longer an issue. We don't have to think about it. What people are really saying is 2 questions. One, how do I make sure I'm taking the right actions? And the more important question is, how do I stay consistent? Right? That's the biggest challenge. It's not habits. Like that Nike thing, just do it. Well, if it was just do it, I'd already be doing it.
Right. Right.
So it's about, people are really asking is, how do I stay consistent and how am I going to take the right actions? And that's the question or the answer that a lot of us are really solving for in this type of work.
Right. Right. And do you often get the question of how do I get rid of nerves?
Yeah. Yeah. I look at it in 2 ways. One, you also have to understand where nerves or ATP or that type of adrenaline is helpful and not helpful.
Yeah.
So on an athletic field, on the 100-meter dash, cool, have that nerves, have that adrenaline, because when the gun goes off, you want to move. But for speaking, I tell people nerves doesn't actually serve you well in the speaking world. And people ask, like, what do you mean? Don't you, if it's important to you, shouldn't you be nervous? And I was like, yeah, well, let's start off. People might say, oh, that first 5 minutes was kind of shaky. And then what happened? It felt easier. Why? Because the nerves went away. So what I usually tell people is that oftentimes the reason we get nervous is because we're overly hyping the situation. So what I tell people to do is de-hype the situation. So instead of saying, I'm talking to this big audience, say, no, I'm having a conversation with some friends, or I'm having a conversation with Rachel about what I feel about coaching, right? How many times can we de-hype this situation instead of trying to rev ourselves up, like affecting our adrenal glands until we get so overwhelmed that when we get on the stage, it's become a fight or flight response if we don't do well. So indirectly, when I'm saying, I got this big presentation, what you're indirectly saying is, I got this big thing, and if it doesn't work out well, then there's going to be something negative that happens, versus de-hyping it, just a conversation.
Right. Yeah, no, for sure. I think when I hear people frequently are struggling with this issue of I get so nervous, and then a lot of the physiological responses. And I think the other thing that can help is there's a difference between getting like having the nerves disappear and not expecting to ever have them versus learning how to acknowledge that you might be nervous, understand why, and then, as you said, have some of these strategies to de-escalate or de-hype. I think oftentimes people are looking to just never be nervous again.
You're not.
Like
Well, but think about it. If you were to watch physiologically what's happening to people when they're nervous, two things are happening. Either they freeze up and they stop breathing, or they start to do panic breathing. Right?
Yeah.
So it's almost imagining yourself in a swimming pool, and you're trying to have a conversation, but you're like, I'm trying to grab air. Right? And that's what's happening. And so what I tell people is, if you really want to calm your nerves, it's not always about people like, take a deep breath. But if you're taking a deep breath, you're bringing in more oxygen. It's actually in the breathing out that actually allows for the relaxation.
Yeah.
So breathe in.
Yeah.
Slower breathes out. And that's what's like going to help relax that nervous system.
Right. Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. So I'm curious, because a lot of your work involves that somatic experience, people connecting with their bodies, et cetera. How has your work evolved over the past few years, specifically with regards to some of the virtual kind of technology changes?
Is the longer I do this work, the more I actually realize how much I need to simplify it. And, even when we talk about the future of work, yes, there's going to be more technology. Yes, there's going to be more things out there. But one thing is going to be constant. It's going to be humans working with humans.
Yeah.
And so understanding what makes humans thrive, what makes humans drive, what makes humans interact in the world in which they do, I think is going to be key. And so as the future of work goes, I actually just got back from a 5-day darkness retreat. That's, sensory deprivation, pitch black for 5 days. Is that I actually believe the more that we're bringing in technology or trying to get these solutions that are outside, the more that it's actually going to focus to go more introspectively and internal to solve that. And we're already seeing this in a way. When we first started, we could say if we wanted to get information, we had to go to where? The library.
Right.
Then the library went to where? The internet. Then the internet then went to our phones. Now it went to, hey, you just type something into ChatGPT or some of these other AI applications or technology applications, and you get your answers right away. But what's the next stage? You can't get any closer other than maybe like a chip in your brain. That's most likely already happening.
Yep.
But I think the next step is really going to be, people are going to realize, well, if it's no longer about knowledge anymore, who's going to help me answer the question about like, why are we here? What's important to me? Who am I? And I think the future of work is going to cause people to go much more internal, introspective,
Mm-hmm.
than going external.
Mm-hmm. I hope so. I hope so. I think because of the space we're in, which is, AI focused training and on video specifically, like we get a ton of requests from people asking, like, can't you just like filter deep fake to make me just like look better or behave differently? And we fundamentally believe that building skills in the human user
Yeah.
is what's important. I don't know if you follow. Did you follow the Meta's recent launch of their like updated metaverse?
Yeah, you mean where it's the lens, but it actually takes a coded view, so it actually looks like two humans that are talking.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I saw that.
So Lex Friedman was doing a little promo for it, and it was what he said was fascinating because he showed up and he's not the most expressive person, right?
Mhm.
He's like pretty monotonous. He doesn't really involve his facial expressions very much, and so he was like, "Wow, this avatar is so accurate. Now what I have to do is work on my own communication
Yeah.
skills so that my avatar can actually like not look like as robotic as I am." Which I was
Yeah.
like, that's like, I was like, that's where we come in. But it's just funny.
Yeah.
There's a tension there.
Yeah. Is people are still going to want to have a human experience. I mean, the way that I look at AI, it is not that it's AI or not. Because here's why I actually do a lot of work on the sales side of things. I work at Google and people are trying to figure out like, how do I communicate AI in a really human centric way? And when you look at it, it's like, hey, imagine that for me, I am a speaker. I am not necessarily a writer. And so
Mhm.
what would happen is if I needed to write something, I would write it, but I'm like, there's kind of these grammar mistakes. I wish it could be formatted in a better way. And so like, okay, I will do a voice note, throw it into there, and then it would actually formulate the thoughts in a much more coherent way. So it is a tool, it is a resource, right?
Yeah.
Or what you
Right.
can do is you can use all of these other AI applications out there that makes your life easier. But what I see a lot of people doing is they're doing more and doing more and doing more versus now
Mhm.
because you've been able to save a whole bunch of more time. Now, what do you want to do with that saved extra time?
Yep.
And I want to go hang out with my little ones. I want to maybe pick up a new hobby. So I think if we look at AI as a resource and a tool to allow us to not to be spending on time on the things that are actually
Yeah.
not the best for us
Mhm.
and reorienting that time to the things that we actually want to do as humans, I think it's actually going to be a really big opportunity once that unlock happens.
Yeah. Right. And this actually brings us, you started talking about AI specifically. So I wanted to ask,
Mhm.
how, in terms of communication, whether that's communication coaching or just the way we interact as humans, right? Like, where do you think AI plays the biggest role?
Ooh, where does AI play the biggest role in communication? I talked about this about I think a couple of weeks back ago, and what is allowing people to do is, hey, I have this thought. Let's say you have a blog article. It's like, hey, I want you to write a blog article on communication of the future. And what that individual does is they then go out and they post that article. And let's say, well, my goodness, I got some responses. And so they ask a whole bunch more questions
Hmm.
into this document, into this chat, and they're in all of these articles. And now they are seen as the expert. But something's going to happen. Someone's going to say, hey, you expert, hey, you individual that's been posting all of this great content, we want you to come in and speak on our stage or do this interview.
Hmm.
But what's going to happen? If you've just immediately just wrote it and posted it, do you actually understand what you're actually saying?
Mm.
So, with the role of AI in communication, I actually believe that communication is going to be a rare art, especially this one-to-one communication
Yeah.
later on, because now they're having these technologies that are speaking for them. But is that
Mhm.
going to help them through one-on-one conversation, through me and you having this conversation? Because otherwise, they might end up being seen like a fraud.
Right. Right. I mean, communication's already such kind of an art and science. So it's
Yeah.
but I agree there's a certain amount of atrophy that can happen if we over rely on these tools to do the work, right? To save us from doing the work that's required to really have an understanding of anything, really.
Well, hear this though. So I woke up in the morning and my alarm went off. And then all of a sudden I realized that, oh my goodness, it's 7:01. And I need to get my Eggo waffles out of the refrigerator. See, the reason I say it that way is we realize that communication just isn't about the words that you use.
Yes.
Right. I'm able to make a story about getting Eggos out of the waffles, some motivational, something intense.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what we're not seeing. That's what the human is able to have, is that inflection, that way about communication is more than just the words that we use, but it's really about the connections that we are building.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. The delivery and the emotion and the choice that we all have in terms of like, how are you going to make this land?
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. Totally. So, this episode, by the time this episode is shared, we're actually going to be pretty like closer to the end of the year. And so I'm curious, like, what are you most excited about looking forward? Yes to the next year, but I feel like things move too fast now. So it's
too fast, yo.
let's just like handle like next month.
What are you doing next week? Let's go there. What are you hoping for by the time you wake up tomorrow?
Yeah.
I'm actually really excited. There's been a lot of changes in my life that are happening, but at the same time, I always ask this question of, well, who do you want to be? Right? What story do you want to tell? And so in terms of communication, I have a lot of content coming out where it is more of me just being real, me just being honest, me talking about the work that I do, the people that I'm working with, the impact, the lessons, all that kind of stuff. I have some companies that are, launching up in the next couple of months that are also launching in this area. I just did this 5-day darkness retreat where I had 143 audio recordings on just like what it feels like to be in sensory deprivation. So what I'm most excited about is getting out of this cubicle of home and really being able to connect with a lot of people that I think are going to be going through a lot of stuff over the next year as they're navigating this game, as I call it, called life.
Oh yeah, the great game of life. Yeah, no, that sounds great. I love the focus on, togetherness, but also like internal work. I think that that's very needed at this time.
Yeah. So thank you. I mean, just communicator to communicator on a really powerful way.
Yes. Well, thank you also on that note. You have so much to share, and I think anyone would be really lucky to learn more from you and work with you. So what are the best ways for people to just even follow your work or get in touch with you directly?
Yeah, I mean, if you just type in Coach AK into Google, there's a whole bunch of information and links that will come up. I would say the best way is connect with me on LinkedIn, Coach AK. If you are looking to like kind of take that next right move, I have a book called The Next Right Move, Starting Strong. But I think overall, it's like if you're just trying to figure out, you or your team is trying to figure out how to like take that next right step, right? What habits you need to build, what distractions you need to remove from your life, what micro habits can you infuse, or maybe you're just trying to figure out like, who am I and what's important to me. Love to have a conversation.
Awesome. All right. Well, you heard it here first. Coach AK, thank you so much for taking the time to join us and sharing all of your amazing insights.
Appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you.
Talk soon.